Genesis chapter 8, verse 4. We've seen in the prior verses that the flood waters are starting to recede from the earth. Now we're going to see what's going to happen to the ark. So let's take a look. Ke ekathisen hekibotas in meni to hebdamo. Hebdame ke ekhadi to menos epi ta ore ta ararat. We'll begin by noticing this kai here is, of course, linking back to the prior verses, extending the narrative, and our first verb here, and the only verb in this particular verse, is from kathizo. And notice you have a sigma here, third singular ending, epsilon on the front end. There's a third singular aorist, active indicative, driving the narrative forward. And that word means to sit or to place, maybe to place oneself, something like that. Now, if you look it up in the Masoretic, it's tenach here, which is to come to rest. And so, slight difference. Apparently, this is the only time that pairing happens in the Septuagint, where this particular word is translated with kathizo. Some have argued that it actually brings maybe a little bit of a personification for the ark here. You see the ark is the subject, the kibotas. So we could translate it, the ark sat down, if you will. Probably a more idiomatic translation would be it came to rest or it took its place, something to that effect. Of course, it's just to rest in Hebrew. Then we get a time frame, actually two different ways of framing the time before we find out where it comes to rest. So first off, we'll have in meni. Notice the in here is taking the dative. That'd be a third declension ending there, kind of weird. Main here means month. So we're finding out what month it's in, and it's in the Hebdamos month. This is the 7th month. So in the 7th month, then we have, and this is nicely set out by the commas, more information, further clarifying, what part of the month we're in. So we have Hebdome, notice the dative there, in the 7th. You could even argue maybe it's piggybacking off of the in. Either way, the dative makes sense as a chronological framing here in the 7th, but also the ekadi. Now, ekos means 20th. So you put these two together and you end up with the 27th. And it's the 27th of, notice the genitive, of the menos, of the month. So it's the 7th month and it's on the 27th day of that month. And where does it sit? Where does it kathizo? Actually, let me mention this first here before we move on. The Masoretic text will mention that this is on the 17th day, not the 27th day. And we've already seen this slight slippage in the chronology already being introduced in chapter 7, verse 11, where you see a similar 10-day difference. And so most likely the translator here, assuming that he had this Proto-Masoretic text in front of him, maybe he's trying to do some math here to smooth things out. And so the fact that he's translating this one with 27th is to match what he'd already done in 7:11. In a few days, I'm going to do a broader chronological summary of the sort of flow of the flood. And there is that little bit of a gap between the Greek and the Septuagint. On the whole, they agree, but there is that slippage there. So just be aware of that. If you look it up in an English Bible, you're going to see it's the 17th day, whereas it's the 27th day in the Septuagint. Now, where does it sit or come to rest? Epi ta ore, so upon the, this is plural for mountains, upon the mountains, ta ararat. Now, the repetition of the ta here is pretty interesting. The basic idea is it's upon the mountains, which are, that'd be the ta function of Ararat. And so that's well known. That's where the ark comes to rest. But where is that mountain? The mountains of Ararat, the Vulgate translates it as the mountains of Armenia. The Targum and the Peshitta translate it as the mountains of Kardu, which is probably an early form of Kurd, the Kurds, if you will, Kurdistan, something like that. And the general impression is that this mountain is in eastern modern-day Turkey. You can also see it's close to Armenia here. That's the widely acknowledged location that Genesis is talking about here. And this is a live look at what it looked like. This is actually a globe from 1490. You can see Armenia here, and there's the ark. That's what it looked like on top of the mountain. Actually, that's kind of cute. What does the mountain look like today? These are the mountains. There's a greater one and a lesser one of Ararat there in eastern Turkey. So you can see the basic idea is that Moses here, the author, and then it's reflected in the translation, is aware that really Ararat is a chain of mountains, and so the ark is somewhere here among those mountains. That's the basic idea. But quite significantly tall mountain there in Turkey. So there you go. That's where Ararat is. Thanks for tuning in. That's Genesis 8:4.